Hello and welcome to Mosaic on behalf of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. We all know the cheerful little Christmas carol, "It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas." You're probably hearing it in the store, on the radio ever since Halloween. Today we're going to change the lyrics a bit. Our song is, "It's beginning to look a lot like Advent." Christmas is a beautiful destination, but the path we take to get there is important. In fact, it's crucial. Where are we going in such a hurry? If the answer is, I don't know, I'm following the crowds, checking the sale prices, and heading toward those sparkling lights, it may be time to slow down and take stock. Our goal, our destination, our Christmas means meeting God Himself in the flesh. Are we ready for that? Are we prepared? And how can we prepare? We also know, all of us, that wonderful Christmas poem that begins, "'Twas the night before Christmas and all through the house." But today we'll change those lyrics too. We're going to say, "'Twas the month before Christmas and all through the house." The month before Christmas is this season called Advent. And all through the house, all through the school, all through the church, we can be preparing ourselves and our families for the deep meaning of Christmas. Advent is 4 lovely, truly spiritual and educational weeks. Our guests here today are 2 experienced Catholic educators who will help us to understand what we can do in the home, in the school, in the community, in our hearts to make a great Christmas. Advent is the shopping season, yes, but a wise priest recently wrote, "Far more important than wrapping gifts in Advent is the obligation to unwrap ourselves and our hearts, to prepare to meet Christ and to live life as He wants us to." So we'll take a brief break, and after this, please join us to discuss Advent, our path to Christmas. Hello and welcome back to Mosaic. Our guests today are 2 Catholic educators. Marie Bordeleau is the principal of St. Hilary's School in Tiburon. She's a very experienced educator, been 6 years the principal of the school. You've been 12 years in Catholic school administration and principal of this school, and prior to that a public school teacher. And Marie is the mother of a young son. She has a BA and MA, and she's working on her doctorate in educational leadership. And beyond her is Marian Connelly. Marian Connelly is the principal of St. Cecilia's Grammar School in San Francisco, been there 6 years as principal and nearly 30 years as a teacher, and is also an alumnus of the school, alumna, I should say. And she has a grown daughter who is a doctor, I understand, or a nurse.
Pediatric cardiology nurse.
So experienced educators, experienced family women, and they're going to help us understand what Advent is, what our preparation for Christmas is. And let me ask you first, here's someone posed this Advent puzzle to me the other day and said, in the Catholic Church, how does New Year's come before Christmas?
So, John, actually, Advent is the beginning of the liturgical year in the Catholic Church. So we actually start our new church, I could say Happy New Year on December 3rd, because that's actually the first Sunday of Advent.
Okay.
And what happens then is we go 4 weeks for Advent, and then there's actually 12 days of Christmas.
Right.
And then we go into ordinary time, and there is 6 weeks of ordinary time, which will then be followed by the season of Lent, which then leads us to the most holiest of weeks with the Triduum and with Easter. And then it ends with ordinary time again until we hit Advent next year in 2018. So
in my intro, I suggested we're all rushing toward Christmas, and I think you would agree, but you're saying there is this season called Advent that is the New Year, and it strikes me that if we treat it like a new year, there's a kind of impulse to sort of renew our self-discipline, look at our ultimate goals, and all that kind of thing that goes with the New Year. Is Advent part of that?
Yeah, Advent is really a time for us to slow down in the busyness of the real world, where I think, as you said earlier, we're already seeing Christmas in the stores, but Christmas actually doesn't start until the 25th of December. So Advent is our time to slow down, to take some time to pray, to do good deeds for other people, and to really be family with each other and to do good things.
Now, I know that you both have in your schools and parishes really rich programs during Advent in which people of all ages participate, and you'll give us some detail on that. Can we ask, well, let me ask you this. Advent is not a newfangled feast. It's an ancient celebration, right? An ancient Christian practice.
Right. Advent has been going on since the 5th and 6th century.
Okay.
But I think what has happened again in our world, you know, it becomes about, unfortunately, the money and shopping and decorations, when it's really not about that. It's about preparing for the birth of Jesus, which happened 2,017 years ago. So we're not saying that Jesus is going to be born again, but it's the second coming. It's for us preparing our time and getting ready for our meeting with Jesus.
And let's talk about a couple of the tools of Advent. The Advent wreath, I think, is probably familiar to most people. I can show a couple examples here, if the camera can pick that up. The Advent wreath is generally an evergreen kind of thing with 4 candles in it. And you can tell us what the candles mean, I hope, and how they're used. I'll slip this into the center of the shot, too. There's, just to show everyone how simple it is, this is an ancient 2 pieces of crossed wood that are the basis for the Advent wreath in my family's house that my dad made 80 years ago or so. You apply your evergreens to that, you light the candles. So can you explain a little bit about this?
Yes, as you notice, the Advent wreath, if there was greenery around it, has 3 purple candles and a pink candle. So week 1 of Advent, which this year starts on December 3rd, you would light the first purple candle, and that represents hope, that there's hope in our world. And boy, in this day and age, do we need to keep that in our hearts, that there is hope. And it's often called the prophet's candle. Week 2, the following Sunday, you would not only light the first candle, but you would also light the second purple candle, and that represents peace. And it's often called the angel's candle. Now notice that's purple, kind of royalty. The 3rd week, we actually light the pink candle, and the pink candle represents joy. And it's often called the shepherd's candle. So the shepherds are out in the field gathering the sheep. So that 3rd week, it's like, okay, great, there's joy. And then on the 4th Sunday of Advent, we go back and we light the 3rd purple. So we now have all 4 candles lit. And that 4th candle represents love. And it is also called the Bethlehem candle because Christ was born right following that 4th candle.
And what we're talking about is a daily ritual that a family can do. I know in my parish church there's a giant wreath and we light it before Mass during, but I think a family does this at the family dinner table every day.
Well, either that or maybe they do it after dinner, or it might be something they do before they go off in the morning. But it's a wonderful family time to spend reading a scripture or taking the gospel from that day and reading it together as a family.
Spiritual practice of some kind. There's another little habit or tradition called the Jesse tree, which, as I understand, and here's a photo of one of those samples. This is an excursion into the Hebrew Scriptures to know about Christ's ancestors and the history of salvation coming from that direction. And this is also a daily thing that a family can do, am I right?
That's
hanging an ornament on this each day.
That's correct. So the Jesse tree actually takes from the father of King David. His name was Jesse, and he was anointed by the prophet to establish a royal family. And then this is 1,000 years later when Jesus was born. So a great activity that I know in many schools, and I know we do this in our school, the children learn about the ancestors of Jesus. So Jesus is always represented by a star. And so the star would be, of course, at the top of the tree, just like your tree in probably most homes has some kind of a star. But then we go back and we look at the Genesis, and the key character, one of the key characters in Genesis is the story of Adam and Eve. So you would represent that story often with an apple and a snake. And the children would then, draw the picture, and they would write Adam and Eve on it, and then they would hang it on the tree. Followed by the next people. Cain and Abel would be the next people in the Bible. And you go through Genesis all the way through Isaiah, and you learn about the people in the Old Testament, the men and women that came before Jesus.
That's wonderful. Another family activity. Let's take a brief break, and we'll come back and we'll learn about the next tool of Advent, the Advent calendar.
Great.
Thank you. Welcome back. We're talking about Advent, the path to Christmas, with some very experienced Catholic educators responsible for the spiritual upbringing of children from age kindergarten on up. So Marie Bordeleau, principal of St. Hilary's Grammar School in Tiburon, I wanted you to explain the rich program that you have in your schools. And this is with, I think we looked at two tools of Advent. One is the Advent wreath. The other one is the Jesse tree. And now we have, I think, something familiar to many people, the Advent calendar, yeah? Let me show a couple of interesting samples. People have the paper Advent calendar, sort of just a thing you can put on the refrigerator and mark off. There's also a circular Advent calendar. You open a little door each day. I saw a couple that were very ornate. This is a facsimile of a German cottage, and here you open a door each day of Advent and read a scripture and see a painting. And then this wonderful item here, this is an Advent calendar that's a Russian Orthodox church, very ornate. So these things run from the most simple to the most complex. And Marie, you brought one to show and to share with us. Can I pick this up?
Sure.
Okay.
What we've tried to do is, as Marian was explaining some of the history, and we have a very tradition-based faith, but very often with the kids, trying to keep it very practical and relatable to their everyday life. And so what we've done is in every classroom, this is a part of our Christian leadership class puts this together for each one of our classrooms. And very often, like when I was a young lass, my mom would make, we would have one of these with pieces of chocolate in them. But what we've tried to do is, they get enough sugar as it is, each class can pull one of these pieces out every day, and inside is a little note about what they can do in honor of Advent. So for the second day of Advent, it's let someone else go first in line today. And then the next day, on the third day, the class will open it up, excuse me, and say, offer your forgiveness to someone who has hurt your feelings today. And so each day they have something else to honor the season of Advent, to show compassion and to live the messages of that we're trying to teach through the preparation for Christmas.
So that hangs in the classroom?
Those hang in each of the classrooms,
And every
correct.
day at a certain time, they go through it, the children participate.
Right.
That's wonderful.
And what we've tried to do through a couple of different activities, this one included, is unpack the story of Jesus' birth. And so a couple of other, can I show a couple of other items?
Please, yeah.
Okay. So the other thing we've tried to do is, the Catholic faith, as we know, has a very long, rich history, and with many traditions, which are great. But we also need to also make sure it's relatable to kids into the future, today. And so what we've done is, on the nativity scene in the office, we will have QR codes, and each of our kids have iPads for as part of their education. And so what they can do is they can scan these as a class, and there's a message about Advent that they can receive this, so they're accessing some information in a method that is exciting and engaging to them. So bringing the Catholic faith to them in a way that they're used to.
They're used to having a mobile device of some kind. In fact,
Yes.
it's part of your program. So yeah, to put the Catholic faith on that. Someone pointed out that, the internet is the most fantastically opportune. It's the most fantastic museum that you could wish. Every piece of art, every kind of music, every kind of text is on it, and people need to be brought to take advantage of that, I think. And you have some other items here?
I have more, yes. So the other thing, too, is I know families today struggle to find a lot of time to be a family and in the busyness of their days.
Sure.
And this is especially true during Christmas. And so what we've done is we've created a family Advent calendar that can be posted on the fridge, and each day is a different way that the family as a unit can celebrate Advent. So a couple of items. On Friday, December 16th, have a family movie night and make popcorn and watch Christmas together, just being part of a family community. Gather some friends and neighbors and go Christmas caroling. Cut and paste pictures from Christmas cards you receive into ornaments for your tree. It's just ways of preparing and being together and doing activities that are simple and manageable, and also to remind you to slow down. Because how many times do we hear families tell us, oh, we just want to have a simple Christmas this year? And these are some ways to remember to have a simple Christmas.
Yeah.
Can I keep going? Is
Please.
this okay? Sorry. The other part is Advent and Christmas is often about the coming of Jesus, but we cannot forget Mary and her role. And one of the things that is so important we encourage is the remembering, teaching our students that Mary had a huge leap of faith and said yes to being the mother of Jesus. Joseph said yes to Mary and Jesus. And so something we do is there's an activity called bringing Mary's yes to the classroom, and watching kids and talking students through how they can say yes to God and Jesus every day through their actions and what they do and say to each other and the world at large. And so that's all part of what we do through our Advent celebration.
So this is a text for teachers to use in the classroom.
It's a guide, absolutely.
That's very, very nice. And I think that your parish, you said, has also a kind of rich history of things, various activities. Before I let you get into that, I think we'll take our next break, and you can tell me about what your parish and community does. We'll come back after this brief break and talk more about Advent. Hello and welcome back. We're talking about Advent and a preparation for Christmas. Key figure in Advent, of course, is Mary, the mother of Jesus, as was just mentioned here. I wanted to bring this out from my family's archives. This little lady, if you can see her, is Mary, and it's a little statue made by a friend of my mother's many years ago. My mother has treasured it forever. It happens to be the pregnant Mary. There she is. And I think this was something of a novelty at the time. I think Renaissance painters painted the pregnant Mary, but I don't know that we often really think of her in that way. And this, my mother would place at the center of our Advent wreath. And she stood there going through pregnancy, and we watched her. And there's also the tradition, I think, of the empty creche, the empty manger in the creche where Jesus hasn't arrived yet, and so on. So the aspect of Mary, which you mentioned, her yes to God, is of great interest, and I understand that there's a lot of Advent functions that she's involved in and so on. And now in your parish of St. Cecilia, you have a very rich program of activities. Can you tell us more about that?
Right. So as you were saying, there's many different feast days during this season of Advent. Actually, we usually start off December 6th is known as the Feast of St. Nicholas, who is like the predecessor of the modern-day Santa.
Sure.
And so one of the traditions that we've adopted is on December 6th, and if it falls on a weekend, we do it on the Friday before. Every person in the school leaves out one of their shoes, either their right or left foot, and some helpers come in and put a little treat in their shoes, and we hear the reindeer horns and we hear the bells, and all of a sudden it gets quiet and the kids go outside the classroom door, and inside their shoe they have some treats to celebrate St. Nicholas. And like on that note too, we our young families group in our parish, it's a group of families where they have children 5 years or younger. We actually have a St. Nicholas Advent party rather than a Christmas party. We do the Advent. And St. Nicholas comes, and each child is asked to bring a gift to the event. And so as a child brings up a gift for another child and puts it under a tree, St. Nicholas gives them a little token, maybe a little stuffed animal or just a little thing to, like, okay, you've just given a gift, St. Nicholas is going to give you something. And we have a big feast, and the families have a time for community. We also do an Advent Mass, rather than like a big Christmas pageant. It's more of an Advent, focusing on, again, either the signs and symbols of Advent or the people of Advent. And the students in the primary grades, in grades K through 3, are the actors for this pageant. And we do the Mass on usually around the second week of Advent on that Friday. And then on the Sunday, they do it for the parish. And what's really wonderful is our men's club then provides a pancake breakfast for everybody in the parish, free of charge. And we probably have 1,000 to 1,200 people come in to our pavilion and celebrate Advent as a community. It is really wonderful. Also, as part of that, our students participate in the Toys for Tots program that the firefighters have, because there's so many families that go without. So our students in grades K to 6 participate by bringing in an unwrapped toy or puzzle for those kids. But our 7th and 8th graders actually help out our parish. Our parish has a giving tree, 900 ornaments on it, and our students, so our 7th and 8th grade, so we have about 140 kids in our 7th and 8th grade. They go and each take an ornament off of that tree the first week of Advent, and they pray for that person who is listed on the ornament. And then they bring a gift wrapped to put under that tree that then is given. Parents come and take those gifts and deliver them to the children. It's a really wonderful time of giving.
That is wonderful. And as you mentioned here, these little items on your Advent calendar are also about service, taking care of others, giving gifts. We're so consumed with getting, I think, and I think the children learn that because they want things. But this countervailing teaching that Advent is a season of preparing for charity and practicing charity is really great.
Well, and part of our job is to be guides for the students that are on a faith journey and teaching them the gospel message. And they are very egocentric, and just developmentally, that's how the kids are at the age that we're dealing with. They think of, how does this impact me?
Right.
Why is this important to me?
Right.
And we need, part of what we do through Advent is to encourage those habits of giving to others, to show compassion, to think of others before yourself. And that's part of, as we unpackage the story of Jesus' coming, which is what Advent is, we hopefully encourage those habits of giving instead of receiving.
That is wonderful. Yeah, the charity, the service, the spirituality, the special prayers, the history, and learning the salvation history, understanding the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and deepening, I think, as I hear from you, deepening the family ties. You're both aware of the kind of fractured, modern, hectic family and how it has to find its center. And it may not be the dinner table anymore, but it could be here, the spiritual practices that make a family a domestic, a little church.
Well, 6 years ago, when I was preparing to adopt my son, I had to go to family classes.
Yeah.
And to get certified as a foster parent within the state. And one of the questions they asked as part of this is, what are the traditions within your family that someone would know makes you part of that family?
Yeah.
And it makes you really reflect on, and a lot of the traditions that I came up with when I was reflecting on that question came back to traditions I have within the Catholic faith. And that's what we're creating for our kids, and hopefully encouraging in our families.
Thank you for telling us that. We're just out of time. Thank you very much for watching Mosaic on Advent.